Now, in terms of policies, to be quite honest, I got lost because I was expecting to hear a debate on foreign policy. And just about as it got into the foreign policy, and you thought, right, fine, now we are going to get into the meat of it, suddenly Adam Bolton jumped in and said, no, that time has gone, now let's go back into the same questions we've heard before. And I was really angry. I really was angry, and I thought, this is Murdoch now coming with his agenda, wanting to have the whole debate and now covering it all up and trying to find the way in which they will now push the agenda in such a way that Cameron will come on top. And I actually got to be very negative towards Cameron as a result, even if I was wrong in assuming it, because it looked to me like this was now done deal.
Yeah, I think maybe the one policy issue that I didn't quite understand was the Trident one. I understand that Gordon Brown and David Cameron both want to update the Trident system, and Nick Clegg, yeah, it's all very well and good to propose not replacing it like for like, but without having an alternative, I didn't understand where he was coming from with that.
The only issue that I found some problems with was the whole immigration issue with the cap suggested by Cameron, and then this whole sort of being sent to certain areas by Clegg, and then Brown just saying, well, it's a point system, and I was like, well, it's still not really very clear what exactly you're meaning and why is that better than the other. They weren't very good at explaining it. All they did was kept saying, well, this is better than your idea, and they never really justified why, which got on my nerves.
I'm afraid I'm an undecided floating voter still, and one of the reasons is that I can't believe a word they're saying about policies yet. They either aren't clear enough on what the actual policy is, or I simply don't trust what they're saying.
Yeah, I think there's still real clarity to come from the politicians. Obviously, they've got one more debate to go, and I think that's their real, chance to finally, make the public understand their real policies. I think they've struggled in previous debates to get that point across. I think points were also repeated last night, which they could have used that time to talk about or go into further detail about, the subjects that should have been raised in the debate. But in terms of getting the message across about policies, I think, one of the other issues that was raised earlier on as well was in terms of, where employment would be in certain areas. I think Nick Clegg doesn't have a clear, agenda on that. I think Cameron picked up on that, and Nick Clegg did not panic, but I think he struggled to justify the system and seemed to be sort of contradicting himself on some of the points raised within his policy. And I think that's something that he needs to let the public understand a bit more and see if there's actually any substance to what he says.
Of course, can't be fully clear about all of the policies that all of the parties have proposed and everything, but I still think that the parties still need to make more clearer what sort of policies are really different among them, in the sense that last night's debate really was about foreign policy. I'm still very unclear about what our government's position is on the EU, for example, because, it's a bit of a grey area. It has many positives, yet it has some negatives. Some people all over the country, especially in the rural parts of the country, have strong views about it. And I just don't think it was fully addressed as it should have been, in the sense that Gordon Brown used his point as calling David Cameron anti-European and Nick Clegg anti-American. And that, for me, it didn't unravel the whole nuts and bolts about what the public needs to understand about the EU. It was just another gaffe about how to paint their opponents in different ways, and just try to sort of show them in different lights, but not really get the point fully across. And really, the British public, more than ever before, need to be clear on what policies they want to understand, what policies is really going to move the country forward, and what we all should do. And just basically a bit more detail rather than more style and more charisma, but just a bit more detail, and that would really make me as a voter happy.